Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk. I'm your host, Malynda, joined by my co-host, Karmel.
Hey.
And in studio today, because we are talking all about the Democratic nominees, we have our favorite Democratic strategist and political analyst, Drexel Hurd.
Hello.
He is no stranger to the We Need to Talk family. We are going to be talking about the last two debates that you saw last week with 20 candidates. Yes, you heard correct, 20 candidates that we kind of all got to hear them speak. Not really all of them. No. But before we get into that, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share if you love what we are doing. We are now on our 14th episode, I think. This is the 14th. Oh my gosh. We're going to do about 9 more episodes, and then we'll end season 1, and then we're going to get into some good stuff into the fall. So make sure you are following us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, iTunes, all of that stuff. You know what to do. You're part of the social media era. Yeah. So let's get to talking about these candidates. So on Tuesday and Wednesday night of last week, we had the first round of debates for the Democratic primary. And we had, like I said, 20 candidates. Some of those people that were on stage, I was like, who are these people? I've never heard their names before. Obviously, there are some people that are a little bit more popular than others, but I'm going to read you the names of all the people that were there. Yes, bear with me because I want you to know who we're talking about.
Here you go.
So we had Joe Biden, who we all know, Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, Julian Castro, Bill de Blasio, Tulsi Gabbard, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, John Hickenlooper, I'm obsessed with his last name, Jay Inslee, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, Tim Ryan, Bernie Sanders, Eric Swalwell, Elizabeth Warren, and Marianne Williamson, and Andrew Yang. So those are the 20 Democratic nominees. They're split into 2 nights. To the first night, let's kind of do a debrief of what happened on the first night. Who was on that stage, Drexel?
Well, John Delaney was on that stage in the first night.
See, I don't even remember him. I don't even remember him. That's what I'm saying. These people don't even get a chance to talk.
He did talk a couple times.
Maybe a couple.
You know, the first.
Barely.
So just to kind of give everybody a little bit of background of how people made that debate stage.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's
super important.
It wasn't something that was just, you know, the DNC and NBC were like, we only want these people. You had to have met a threshold, which was 60,000 unique individual donors, and you had to have been polling at 1% or higher. In this case, there were some people who did not make that. There are some people who almost did not make that. I know that Cory Booker was pushing in the last few weeks to make sure that he could get those donors as well. So there's a lot of folks that
there's some people I'm surprised that did make it
that struggled to hit that.
Yeah.
So and then the names were randomly drawn out of a hat, which actually gave someone like Elizabeth Warren, a little bit of an edge to have almost the entire night to herself in night 1. There were some favorites, and I think I say favorites in terms of how we have elevated some people based on situations like the U.S. Senate race in Texas. So Beto O'Rourke was on that stage. And then you had somebody like Julian Castro, who is President Obama's Housing and Urban Development Secretary. So there were some really good folks on that stage. Elizabeth Warren just really had pretty much that stage to herself. But she kind of took a step back, which is always good.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to peak too early. You don't want to do... You want to do what Kamala Harris did in night 2, but Elizabeth Warren was like, I'm just going to... I feel like I'm in a lower tier right now. I don't have to do as much work.
So kind of going off of that, it seemed, even though it was drawn out of a hat who was doing the debate, it seemed very, very predetermined who was going to be on what night and who was going to be up against who. Because I think it was very obvious, at least to me, the second night was the more popular and well-known candidates. And then on the first night, you did have Cory Booker, Beto O'Rourke, and Elizabeth Warren, which are kind of like... Cory Booker was on the second night.
He was second.
Yeah, sorry. You had Elizabeth, Beto O'Rourke, and then who was next to Elizabeth on stage? I'm trying to remember. But they were...
Cory Booker was first night.
So it was Cory Booker. Because he looked at Beto O'Rourke. There's that meme with him when he started speaking Spanish.
We got to talk about that.
We're going to talk about that. But you had the 4 of them in the middle, which I think was very much so on purpose as far as staging goes. Yeah. But they're the most popular on that night, right. And then they were kind of figuring out, okay, who's going to be against these really, really popular ones like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris. Yeah. So you think that there is a strategic plan as far as how that goes?
I mean, that is not what the DNC and NBC certainly said. I certainly wish they would have done it like on camera. Just kind of drew those names out of the hat.
Yeah.
And that would have probably quashed some rumors out there. But it seemed that NBC was very emphatic about the fact that names were just randomly drawn, and that's how it was done. But, again, it helped some people in night one, and it hurt some people in night two. So it really depends on what you believe at this point. And I know a lot of those folks are going to struggle getting onto the debate stage at the end of July.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because that threshold has.
If you ask me, it's all staged. And I'll always say this, and I'll always lead with that. So,
a critical thinker.
Yeah. Okay.
Or conspiracy theorist.
No, he likes to say critical thinker.
Got it.
We changed it.
Yes.
Because I was saying conspiracy theorist. Right. He's like critical thinker. And I was like, okay.
Because whatever they say, again, there's the they again, we spoke earlier about, of course it's staged. And of course it's supposed to look a certain way. And I'll say this. Out the gate, Elizabeth Warren said the only thing I needed to hear, and I watched the rest, but it's all I needed to hear, because unless this happens, none of it matters. She says we need to have deep and major structural change. That's it. Every bill, agenda, piece of legislation that does not change the structure of even our entire government, the way we vote, all it's just like, it's fun to watch, seeing people get all riled up and then speaking Spanish, but you sound like a Google Translate. It was horrible. Why are people speaking Spanish that don't speak Spanish natively?
Well, it was on Telemundo, so they were trying, they were catering to the people that were watching.
Pandering to the people. Let's get it right. When Cory Booker came out with it, I was like, okay, I gotta go.
Well, to be fair, we know that the Hispanic population is going to be the majority very soon.
Yeah.
And it is in our best interest, and especially in terms of Democrats, in terms of candidates, to be able to communicate effectively by any means necessary to the large swath of a community that will be voting, or that we hope to be voting in our favor over the next few election cycles. Cory Booker speaks Spanish.
Yeah, so does Julian Castro.
So does Julian Castro. So did Tim Kaine. And, Beto... The problem with Beto speaking Spanish when out the gate was that it had nothing to do with the question.
He was stalling.
If he had placed it in a different area, to say, now I want to address the Hispanic community directly, and then he spoke Spanish. I think there's a way to incorporate Spanish without just saying it.
Right.
Because then some people are like, well, where did that come from?
It was so jarring.
Yeah, and I think that candidates who are going to speak Spanish have to be able to, if you watch, for example, Justin Trudeau, the French-Canadian Prime Minister, or the Canadian Prime Minister, they always do one set of remarks in English, and then they always do one set of remarks in French.
Yeah.
And they know that it's coming. And so I think that as candidates start to go forward, if they're going to switch into a different language that they know, Pete Buttigieg, for example, speaks like 7 languages.
Yeah.
So say, hey, now I'm going to talk directly to this, because then that perks another side of ears up. Like, oh, okay, now he's talking to me right now.
Right.
And I think that's the better way to do it, as opposed to having people look at you on the stage and be like,
what are you doing?
That wasn't even the question.
It wasn't the question. It was very random. But I also think that, for me at least, Beto seemed the least prepared.
Yeah,
on the stage.
But Beto seemed the least prepared coming into this whole race.
But I think people expected more of him, because he was a popular name. People knew him. People liked listening to him talk when he was running against Ted Cruz. And I think I was personally disappointed. He wasn't like at the top for me, but I did like his personality.
Sure.
And I thought he might even be a good VP pick. Now I just kind of think he's out of the running.
The thing about Beto ORourke is that people liked him as a person. He reminded everybody of like a Texan Barack Obama. But he was also running against the least popular person in the United States Senate,
in the country.
in the
No, I'm just
country,
kidding.
but I mean,
But yeah.
and so he had an advantage. He had that advantage for him
And he
to
failed.
make him a favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing happened to John Ossoff in Georgia. They were running against people that people just did not like,
Right.
and so it helped elevate them.
Right.
If you actually look at Beto ORourke, he doesn't have, and you saw his Senate campaign too. He doesn't have a large, well-rounded platform.
Right.
He doesn't have a lot that he's offering, and he doesn't like he's rolled out an immigration plan, and you're like, well, of course you roll out an immigration plan because you live in Texas. Like roll out some other plans that
Right.
actually that people aren't expecting.
Right,
Because
right.
you need to win Texas somehow. Like do better if you're going to be a candidate. If you've been, he did a whole 58-day drive around the country, and you come back with no plans.
Well,
Do you know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
honestly, like, it's funny because we say the way he came off on stage, the way he looked last night. It's we want people to perform. We want someone to get up there and say cool things and look a certain way. And he looked scared. He looked nervous a lot of that, that debate and things he came out. And then the Spanish thing, like all of it just was a big cluster. And so it's funny because now we feel like, oh, he's not going to work as our president because I didn't like the way he performed last night. And I heard several pundits talk about their performance because it's a show.
Right.
So we have to get up and get excited for someone regardless of their actual ability to run this country. But like if they don't make me feel good or they don't say funny things or they don't look a certain way or like come off like, very quick and smart and able to take jabs and give them back. Like, what does that have to do with being a president?
But that matters.
And it does.
It matters.
Yes, it does matter because that is the time that we live in
Right.
now. Whether or not you are running for office or you are in the music industry or you are an actor, what you do and what you say and how viral it can get matters to people. It might not matter to the folks who are deeply invested in seeing the country move forward, but certainly to get somebody out excited to vote or to buy an album or to buy or go to the movie theaters or anything like that, you certainly have to. The marketing side of what you do matters to get your polling numbers up. There were several things that Julian Castro going after Beto ORourke on that he said on the first night, in particular on immigration. Julian Castro knew what he was doing. He was going after somebody who is not Hispanic, who everybody assumes is Hispanic, and we've been letting him get away with it. So Julian Castro was like, "Let me remind you that I'm one of the few Hispanic people out of the 20 people that are running for president,
Right.
and I'm not going to let this person get away with it." The same thing you saw Kamala Harris say in night two. So I think that that is something that they have to do because people don't know. But
So then we're again, it's catering, it's pandering, it's getting people excited to vote. But at the end of the day, if the people find someone they like and vote for them, they may not still get in. So what does it really matter? I mean, what's the point if I'm trying to get someone excited about someone? And if they do get in, look at our president now. Is he actually making changes that really affect us? Is he really helping us? So getting someone excited about someone because they speak well, yet the policies they bring into play don't really help me. What's the point?
I think that I think that sometimes we forget that the role of the president. We kind of think that the president is going to save everything.
They treat.
That's how it's played. That's
Yeah,
how it's
because it
positioned.
is the
they
head of the
treat-
state.
Yeah, but
I'm
they
s-
treat the president like he's a deity, and I
Right.
think that's
that's the
it's too
problem with
much.
people. And I think
Yeah.
that, and I was saying this to somebody the other day that we have this idea in our head as Americans of what we perceive to be presidential.
Right.
We've seen it on television. We've seen it through the last 44 presidents. We've seen it in books, and what we think of somebody being great in stature is what we think is presidential. But then now we're at the point where we start looking at people like Elizabeth Warren, and we start looking at people like Pete Buttigieg, and we start looking at people like an Amy Klobuchar or Kirsten Gillibrand or some of these people that you're like, I don't know if they can they be a president? Kamala Harris is a little bit different. She's a little bit different. Because she's a different pedigree.
Right.
She is in the Obama elite look and feel of being a president. So we don't question the fact that she could be president of the United States because she looks like she could be sitting behind the Oval Office desk. Some other people, like the thing about Bernie Sanders is that he might have elevated some ideas that had already been elevated before. Like these ideas that Bernie Sanders are saying, and I know that there are people out there who believe that Bernie Sanders came up with everything that he's said over the past, since 2016. I'm like, actually, no. But can a majority of Americans see somebody like Bernie Sanders sitting behind the Oval Office desk? And that is another point. I mean, if you look at Trump voters, they just wanted somebody who looked the part, who could win,
and represented their quote
and
unquote
represent
values.
their values, right? That's all they cared about. It looked presidential to them. It was central casting, and Donald Trump talked about it a lot when he was talking about his cabinet picks, how central casting they looked, because that's the world that he knows. And he knows that that's what people see on television. That's what they want to see. Do they fit that role? And Democrats, for the most part, at least in this primary, and we've been lucky to have the 23 candidates or so that we have such a diverse group of looking people that any one of them could be president. We just have to get past our initial bias of what we think is presidential.
I think you're right in saying that, but it is hard to get past a little bit because there are certain people I'm looking at, like, I don't see Kirsten Gillibrand as president. I don't. I see her as a Fox News correspondent, even though she's Democratic. Like, the way she looked like a Fox News correspondent.
Right.
And that sounds terrible, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who see that as well. I think, well, some of the things she focused on, too, I just didn't agree with, but I don't think we're going to get past that anytime soon. Because
Kirsten Gillibrand is great. She's been great for New York City or New York State, and she will make a great governor of New York State at some point. But we'll see what happens. Like, she'll never be able to break through some of the more popular candidates.
For sure.
I think that, her focus has always been on family,
women's rights. Huge
I say like the pre-K and the things that she talks about primarily in the debate. I think when you get, and that's something that she's been talking about since she launched her campaign, and that's hard to break out of. Like these one issue candidates, Jay Inslee is talking about climate change. Kirsten talking about family values and things like that. Like those one issue candidates have a hard time breaking out of that if they're not doing multiple speeches.
Well, I actually think she focused too much on women's rights, and I'm saying that as a woman because I don't think that she was catering to America as a whole. Because she constantly was bringing up, I'm going to fight for women, I'm going to fight for women's rights, I'm going to fight for reproductive rights and all of stuff. And I'm like, yeah,
she went a little bit on about healthcare too for a minute, and she made some couple points about that. But then, like, if it almost seems as a woman like you're supposed to say something about women's rights, and if you don't, then it's like for example when the one he made a statement about De Blasio, something about how he's the only one that made reform for women's healthcare, and then the other lady said, well, we've all worked hard to get women's healthcare, but you haven't actually done anything. So she just had to say something. Like she wasn't really saying that he didn't do that. She said, well, we've all worked hard. Like, well, why are you saying that? You come off as as defensive. But if she didn't say something, then it's like, okay, well, now you're not really standing up for women. So it's like, again, like some of these people can't, if you really are passionate about something and you're not just playing the game of politics and the look and central casting and whatever, and you really are going at an agenda and a policy to help and bring change, you don't work. You don't fit. We want someone that has a full breadth of like a whole bunch of plans and a whole bunch of things to do this, and we get riled up and excited about them, and that's who we want. We want someone tall, we want someone with broad shoulders, whatever. But maybe you can't do the job. Maybe you really don't work, but you look the part. You fit the part, so that's who we'll vote for. So even like we said, the threshold was 60,000 donors. Why do they need that? Why do you need one donor? Why can't you just get up there and speak for me because I think you could do the job? Why do you need 60,000 donors? What does that do for you?
Well, I like having guidelines. I think having guidelines because then otherwise we'd have even more candidates than we have
why
now.
Not really pick from a hat then? Because I guarantee you no one's picking from a hat and really just, let's put Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on the same night. Of course they want them on the same night. So obviously there was some kind of strategic part to this. But yeah, I'm not saying anyone can just get up and be on the debate, but like the guidelines and standards we're setting only create the issues we're dealing with. You're saying we need donors, you need sponsors. People need $50 billion to even run a campaign. Why? Why do you need this much money to run this campaign? It's obviously now an issue that people are going to put money behind you that want something from you.
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we know why campaigns are so expensive, and it is to get that message out. And that has a lot less to do with the candidate themselves or the candidates themselves, and more to do with the news organizations, the TV organizations, the radio stations, mailing. Democrats. We certainly do our part to use union printers on everything, and you have to pay for things, and then you've got to pay your whole team, and then you've got to pay all of your state teams, and then go down the list. Right? There's a whole
it all costs
of
money.
things to pay for.
If you're doing it that way, I guarantee you, if you give me $1 million, I could run an Instagram campaign that would do just as much damage. I guarantee you.
I mean, I suppose if you're voters in Iowa and voters in New Hampshire love that one-on-one connection because they are the first in the nation to vote, and they pride themselves on that. So they don't necessarily let the TV dictate where they go. They've been doing that for years, and that's why nobody wants to change where they sit in the primary. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're saying that like Russia has, kind of influenced our way of thinking in terms of social media, sure, yeah.
I'm not saying that at all, because how did Russia do that?
Well, I mean, I'm saying spreading a disinformation campaign.
But how do we know Russia did that?
Because we've talked about it.
Well, we've talked about it, but my question is, how do we know Russia actually did that?
Because we've been told by national security teams
exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's all part of the whole thing we're talking about. Someone told me this, so now I have to believe that, which creates another agenda and creates people feeling a certain way about something else.
But the idea that you don't believe the national security team is worrisome. Okay, well, we can disagree on that.
Good. We need to disagree on this show.
I think that if you've got a large swath of Congress looking at reports all day and getting briefed on national security, there are very few analysts. There are people at the top like John Bolton who have an agenda. But when you get down to, real national security analysts who their job is every day, who take pride in what they do every day and looking at data and analyzing data and making sure that the country is safe, those are the people that are reporting back.
Safe from what?
Safe from external and internal sometimes.
More likely internal.
Mostly external forces, then that is going to be something that, that is undeniable, because it's like this. My dad was a Marine. There are some people who don't believe in serving and what that represents.
Right.
I, on the other hand, I believe that there are a lot of good people who want to serve for whatever reason, and they do it. And, to say otherwise is disrespectful to those people who are putting themselves on the line, whether or not they are military or they are NSA or CIA or anything like that.
I have two follow-up things, but I'm going to go backwards. So just talking about people serving, and then we're going to get back to the debates, because you saying that made me think. Do you think, though, it's more people of color that don't understand why people serve this country based on our history? Because I can actually get behind that and understand why more people of color wouldn't want to serve in the military, knowing that this country really wasn't fighting for them.
Well, look, when my dad was a colonel, he was one of 50 out of 500 colonels, 50 black colonels out of 500 in the Marine Corps. That's staggering. Those numbers are staggering. So I think that I couldn't tell you why. I think that, recruiters are one thing, because certainly recruiters go in. Black people tend to be a little bit more skeptical on a lot of things.
I'm sitting next to
what
one.
I'm saying. What I'm saying. What I'm saying. For example, it took Barack Obama to win Iowa for black voters to come around. Right. And I said this to somebody the other day about Kamala Harris, which was Kamala Harris has to either come in second or win the Iowa caucus, or come or the New Hampshire primary. She's got to come in at the top. She also has to do a very big speech on race and her prosecutorial record.
Yep.
She needs to like push that. She needs to get it out of the way, like Barack Obama did with Reverend Jeremiah Wright,
Yes. Yep.
and
Yep.
then
Yep.
keep it rolling.
Yep.
And I'm sure it's in their plans to do that. However, to answer your question, I don't know why. I think more people are not wanting to serve because they don't necessarily want to serve anymore.
Yeah.
But there are people out there who want to serve just because they feel strongly about service to the country.
For sure.
And I don't think that just means service to I think part of the thing that I think has been the problem is that we define service to the country as one thing, and that is the military, as opposed to service to the country as a teacher, or service to the country as a police officer, or service to the country as a firefighter, or any of those public service opportunities and jobs.
Yeah.
And we have put all of our eggs in one basket instead of being able to talk to families as a whole. At the same time, though, it does not stop Americans from supporting the troops as a whole in terms of funding. We see that with how we can spend trillions of dollars on funding. However, I also know, as a recipient of TRICARE Prime, it is one of the best healthcare systems in the nation. I just so happen to believe that TRICARE Prime should be offered to teachers.
Yeah.
And police officers and anybody who is stepping up to serve for the greater good. Right?
Yeah.
So my dad was also in the Marines. He was gunnery sergeant. Both my brothers, one's a major, one's a lieutenant, Air Force and Army. My stepdad, he was also in the Army. One of my best friends, his son just joined the Air Force. So I have a lot of people around me who have served 10, 20, 30 years, and guys who are just getting in now for different reasons. My mom would not let me walk into a recruiting office, and to this day has no regrets about it because she has a different feel about the military. So black people as a whole, we are skeptical with good reason. Because, I can go serve, and I can probably do 20 years, get a pension, make good money, get educated, have a great job, have a great life, whatever. And at the same time, I could be a guy who does 4 years, come back and have nothing, and no one do a thing for me. And if we just go back 50, 60 years with so many black men coming back from war, coming back after doing a tour, and not only not getting basic care, basic necessities, but then being treated like crap. And regardless of them being a veteran, regardless of who they were when they were in Iraq, in Vietnam, in Korea, in Germany, wherever they were, you get here, who cares? So if someone is skeptical or has ill will or feelings about the military and they have that history, they have every right to feel that way.
Sure.
On the same note, if someone like my friend's buddy who's in the Air Force, who in a year looks like a totally different kid. I mean, he is absolutely a man now. And I'm like, it's obviously working. He loves it. He has dreams of going to CIA. He's working on some stuff right now. Love it. So there's two sides of that, and neither one is wrong. I just don't like when people sometimes look at not liking the military or not liking someone serving as being disloyal to America or I'm not patriotic. So many ways this country was not loyal or patriotic to me or my family or cousins or ancestors from way back when. So I have that right. And if it's not being disrespectful to someone, cool. But if I'm going to go out of my way and make someone feel bad about it or rant and rave about what I don't like, that's different. I just think we can't look at the atrocities this country has laid upon people and think they're supposed to be okay with it, whether it's military, whether it's police. I mean, the police are supposed to be servants too. So when you are in the police part, you are serving the country, but it's not shown that way, and they're not asked to act the same way. They don't have the nobility of someone. When someone in the Marines walks up, everyone, thank you, appreciate you. Cop walks around,
There's fear.
There's fear.
Not respect.
I don't feel at ease when you're around. So who's that on? That's not on me. I can't help the way I feel about that. That's on that sector, that person, that department, whatever they're doing, they're not making me feel as a citizen at ease.
And I'm sure that has a lot to do with the fact that the United States military is global, and they're not as directly affecting communities down the line. Like, they're not in the community, so they don't necessarily have to. Like, when somebody leaves and comes back, they're like, oh man, you were around. But if you were here and there were tanks rolling around the streets and there were things, you know what I mean? There were things going on. That would affect people's psyche a little bit different,
of course,
than having military come out. But, you know, I'm certainly not a person that believes that, going back to what you said, that disrespecting the military is disloyal to America. What I was saying is specifically about the person whose choice it is that they want to serve in a way is disrespectful to them, and what they feel like they are doing to protect the country, whether or not you are a national security analyst or CIA or FBI or any of those organizations that sometimes people vilify because what they see, their skepticism is putting the department is on the department, and thus everybody else who has gone out of their way to want to serve. Listen, I just did a wedding the other day who the guy just got recruited by the CIA. So like, you know, and he's a Marine and he's doing different things, and you know, he's one of the nicest people. And I'm like, it takes a certain type of person to want to be like, I'm going to serve, and I want to just make sure that the country is safe by any means necessary. And I think that those are the people that if you make that choice, more power to you. You know, do it. You know, same thing with politicians. It takes a certain level of narcissism.
100%.
To be a politician.
And say, I can lead
and
these
say,
people.
Right. And say that I'm
country.
the one to do it.
Yeah.
Or I'm the one to lead, you know, be a congressman or be a city councilman or do this. I'm the one to do that. And, you know, to vilify those people, to say that all politicians are bad, like somebody's got to do it. And it's not going to be somebody who does not believe they are the right person for the job. That is just the society that we live in, which it takes a certain type of person to do that. It takes a certain type of person to be an actor. If you think that you're better than somebody else going into that audition room, you could be a politician. Same thing with music. My songs are better than this person. I want to be on the Billboard 100 at the top. You could be a politician because you are playing people chess just like everybody else. You are hyper targeting those people with beats. You're hyper targeting those probably with movies, with your choices and stuff like that. So this idea that it is that we vilify a certain type of profession is always really unsettling to me because we don't apply the same standards to other professions.
Agreed.
But like, so my mom, when I first became a comic, was like, all I do is smoke crack and drink and all that. And she's basing that on, you know, Richard Pryor.
Of course.
You know, whatever. And one or two situations where that happened. And it becomes the, you know, the blanket statement for all comics. But then that's how our society works. When we see something on TV, it creates a narrative for us in our minds and our homes, and we run with that.
Yep.
You know,
like the presidency.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, seriously, it goes back to it could be full circle about what we talked about.
No, you're right. You're right.
100%.
So I want to go back because as you were talking about this, it made me remember a thing that you said about the word agendas. And I really want to get out of this negative connotation of that word because agenda is just a list of things that you plan to do. And I want politicians and I want candidates to have an agenda because I want to know exactly what you're going to do when you get into office, what you're going to do for these people, and how you're going to do it. So I really think we need to get out of this mindset that having an agenda is a bad thing. I think it is actually a very good thing to have an agenda.
And you see that in Elizabeth Warren. I mean, she has all but doubled down on this idea that she has a plan for everything.
Right.
It's on everything that she puts out.
Right.
I have a plan for that. She, you know, the other night during the second debate, you know, when the question was, do you have a plan this is to everybody, do you have a plan to deal with Mitch McConnell? And her answer was, yep, I have a plan for that. And I wish she would have just left it there and not said anything else after that. Because all she had to do was say that, and everybody would have known exactly what she was saying. Don't you worry. Mama Warren has a plan for it. I've already thought about how best to deal with him.
Right.
And but at the same time, you know, the plan that I would have liked to hear from a majority of our presidential candidates would have had to do with the Senate, which is I have a plan to not only elevate my policies, but help Democrats across the country who are running in Senate races that are so important, so we can beat Republicans at the ballot box in these Senate races. I would have liked to see a more party structure answer to some of these people, because we know that yes, you can win the presidency, we can lose the Senate, and still be in somewhat of a situation, 4 years from now or whatever. So I think that the Democrats have to start talking about the Senate as the key, as the goal, as opposed to in addition to their policies.
Right.
Nobody can say my plan. I have a plan for this without tying that to the Senate.
Right.
I have a plan for this, and here is what candidates should be talking about.
Right.
And that's what I'm hoping that some people are going to start to latch on to that.
Right, and John was saying this. My husband, if they take over the Senate and the House, then if Trump gets reelected, knock on wood, hopefully he won't, then he's not going to be able to really accomplish anything anyway. So I agree that they do need to have a plan as far as that is concerned.
Yeah, I think someone that's strong about their plan, their agenda, whatever you want to call it, the connotation exists because, again, people come in with a plan, and there's some other underlying agenda, and that just becomes what actually happens. So if we had one president that came up and said, I'm going to do this, and then they actually did that, damn, okay, that finally, because I've asked this several times to you, Drexel, before about how many pieces of legislation have we ever seen passed that solely helped people? And they actually brought it up a couple times, and they talked about corporate kickbacks, stuff not helping the people. We have not seen that yet. So that's what I'm saying. Like, we hear all this talk about tax reform, healthcare,
immigration
pre-K,
reform, criminal justice
we hear
reform.
all these same topics brought over and over and over again. And there's not ever a change because I just don't feel there's anything there for us. It's always something around it that's connected to some kind of corporate kickback. And that's why we have lobbyists out there all the time trying to get stuff, because it's not really about us. So if I had someone come out and say, look, I don't care about any of this. I wish someone was up there was just talking real. Like, I honestly don't care about that. I'm here to do this, this, and that. And it was just Karmel, just talking about me, Drexel, Malynda, just stuff I need to have happen. That would blow me away. It's not going to happen because the structure we have dictates you can't do that and win.
But here's the thing. So politics is not my world. The law is not my world. I'm married to a husband. I'm married to a lawyer. I've seen like one paragraph of legal writing, and I'm like, I don't want to read this ever again. So are we? In you saying that though, it sounds like you're making it easier said than done. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we realize how hard it is to put something into law and to create reform for certain things.
I know it's complicated.
And
I know it's hard. And I think that's part of the issue. But on top of that, I think there's things that we don't talk about, or we just don't care anymore, because there's not going to be a change that really helps me. Because I don't have billions of dollars to go out and ask, hey, can you help me get a job?
Sure. And I think that, part of the other thing that I always remind people is that the things that affect people the most are not the laws that are written in Washington, D.C. They're the laws that are written here in Los Angeles, and here in California. The governor Newsom here in California just got his $25 billion budget passed this week, and LA Times put out a whole thing that showed the breakdown of where a lot of that money was going to. At least $17 billion of that money is going to deal with homelessness in the state of California, as we have 200,000 plus kids on the streets of California. And we've seen an 8% increase in homelessness over the past 2 years. So I think that if folks start to look at their states and their local politicians and getting involved in those areas, people would, people put so much faith in Washington and put less faith in what's right here in their backyard.
People need to pay attention to this.
Go back to what I said was, people put more faith in the United States military than they do in their own backyard, in terms of those people that are actually keeping them safe on the streets around the corner from them.
Right.
And so I think that if people start to shift their mindset to realize that politics is local, that safety is local, that schools are local, that libraries are local, that everybody in your community has a stake in each other, then that is the mindset and then let Washington do their job to kind of navigate the overall guidelines of that. Like the Department of Education puts out a series of guidelines, and that schools are required to follow. How they get to that point is up to the school district and up to the state and up to those things. Every state, not every state, but there's a lot of states out there who require their students to learn about states' history. That things are hyper targeted to those specific people, and then on down through the district and through the counties. And so we've got to, I always tell people, yeah, if you're a Republican or Democrat, join your local clubs, join your local organizations, get on your state party, there's a lot of things that you can be doing to feel like you're engaged. And then, here in California with the California Democratic Party, we actually help dictate a lot of what our assembly people do, what our local politicians do, in terms of what things that we endorse. And then on down to the clubs. Like I'm a member of Stonewall Democratic Club here in Los Angeles. It is the largest, if not the only, LGBT organization, Democratic organization in almost the state. And so we know that politicians look at Stonewall and say, what is Stonewall going to do? Where do they lie in terms of their support? And then we kick back to that and say, yep, that's, or we'll call them out and we'll do that kind of stuff. So I think there is an opportunity there for everybody to shift their mindset, to remember that Washington does not always represent local communities.
For sure, but for those people, like I'm going to say you, Karmel, but there's certain people, like when you say that number of, he got a $17 billion budget passed, right? But I know for a fact that $3.5 billion in Los Angeles is going towards, $17 billion is going towards homeless, you said? Homeless cleanup. And I know for a fact that $3.5 billion in Los Angeles is going toward building new jails. To me, I'm like, well, what is that?
$215 billion. That's the governor's budget.
Wow.
His whole overall budget.
Okay,
and so $17 billion is going towards homelessness. What does that mean? Because every time I've heard, Mayor Eric Garcetti talk or other people talk about homelessness, they say this money's going towards homelessness. But what does that mean? Are you building? Are you building new places? Are you just doing cleanup? Because I've seen 1 million homeless cleanups, and that makes me sick to my stomach.
In theory, and I'm only talking about Governor Newsom's budget, the state will say we've earmarked $17 billion to fight homelessness. We have 50 or 100, however many counties in the state of California. We are now going to allocate that money to each county, and it is up to them to decide how that money is distributed.
That's what I have a problem with.
And there are some counties who will use that money properly, and there are some counties who will misappropriate that money and use it for it's the state's money in terms of the taxes that we pay here in California and stuff like that. So that money has to be allocated, but it can't. But what I'm hoping is that the governor knows that once you start allocating that money, counties have to follow a strict set of guidelines in how they appropriate that money, which I do believe that is a thing. But that money goes directly into the counties. Here in Los Angeles, we have a crisis,
a huge
homelessness crisis.
It's massive.
And listen, Eric Garcetti, great. He has every plan that I've seen in terms of fighting homelessness can never catch up to what's going on.
It's like right when you get up to it, there's more homeless
there's
people.
just more going on, and he's trying to fight an endless cycle, an endless battle. So, but at the same time, as long as people realize what's going on around them, I think they'd feel that like what we see nationally is not necessarily what's happening in every county.
Right.
So, because when you brought that up, and if people understood really how the whole system was structured, I think they would be blown away. Because when you talk about, Washington and D.C. and versus the local and what's happening here, I don't think people even realize how the company that is America is structured. I don't think people understand how convoluted this government and corporations and how it works and all that. Like even in the Declaration of Independence, United is not capitalized. And people know what that means, but it's an adjective for the states of America. So your state is what you're really you pledge your allegiance to, the state. Like DC is its own thing. It's a corporation. I don't think we understand how many what the difference is, the government, and FDIC, IRS. There are so many corporate factors in this. You're not pledging allegiance to this country and this flag and all that. You're a part of the state. Like if you ask someone what the word national means, if I say like you're a nationalist, what does that mean to you? You think the nation. A nationalist is someone who pledges allegiance to your state that you're born in.
Well, nationalists also have like
now that's written. That's written. I forget with code 8 USC 1101. I just looked it up not too long ago. But it's actually written in there that's who you are pledging your allegiance to your state when you're called a national. People, no one would know that. People have no idea how many things are written and constructed that set up corporations that you think are government agencies. It's just like you go to court to pay a bill and you have this GC services thing. Like, what the hell is that? It's a company that's funded and set up by the court system to take your money. It's not an actual court system. It's not an actual government-run agency. It's someone that the state or city put there to take your money. So when I hear people talk about like, well, the nations do that and the country's doing this, you don't know what you're talking about. There's so many systems in place, so many things since the creation of this country that set up for you to lose because you don't know how to play the game. So that's the problem I have. I always push people voting for local, city, and state things because that's the real allegiance you have here. It's not to the District of Columbia. People have no idea that that's a corporation. It was even funny last night. They're talking about we need to deconsolidate all these large corporations, Facebook and Amazon. You live in one. You live in a corporation. You're not going to deconsolidate the District of Columbia. There's no one's going to start doing that. Let's not even have that conversation. So when we start talking about things we need to do on this level and that level, you have to start from the beginning. I would think you have to start with the actual thing you're talking about. Because if the structure you're in is also creating the same things you're talking about, it's because you're doing the same thing.
Do you vote nationally?
No.
You don't?
No.
But you vote locally?
Yes.
You've never voted for president?
I think the last time I voted was, what was that? W? Yeah.
You didn't even vote during Obama era?
No.
Interesting.
No.
Wow.
Because
our ancestors died for our right to vote,
That was on them.
Karmel.
I didn't tell you to do that.
Oh, my word. We really have to disagree on that.
I appreciate what they did in order to get us that ability to do that. But it doesn't do anything.
But it's not the point. It's the privilege that we now have
I
to
have
be
the
able
privilege
to
to
do
do
that.
it or not do it.
But don't you think you
My
should be
mom also
honoring
raised
your
me in
ancestors
church. I don't
to do
believe
that?
everything I was taught in church.
Right, but
Right?
but people didn't die for your right to go
Yes,
to church.
they did.
To go to church?
Yes. There were slaves who were killed because they didn't take on the Bible. So they did. Now I have to read the Bible now. Southern Baptists, all that. If you didn't take on the Bible and what this white man was telling you to believe, you got killed.
Valid point.
Okay, so I'm
Valid
saying
point.
there's things I understand what my ancestors went through to get us to where we're at. But it doesn't mean the stuff that we're doing is okay. Doesn't mean it's
But I
all
just
right.
think when it comes to voting, like that's the sole thing that you can do to try to make a difference.
No.
Because I think if
That's
you're,
one thing I can. It's ceremonial.
I
It's
shouldn't say
it's
soul. It's
ceremonial.
one thing that you can do to try to make a difference. But if you're
It's
not
one
even
thing I can do.
exercising
No,
your right
it's
to
one
vote,
thing I
then
can
you
do.
don't have right to complain
It's
about
the
it.
one I don't complain about it. That's another thing. I don't complain about it. But I'm saying it's not the one thing I can do. It's the one thing I can show that I'm doing. It's like boycotting. I hate people who march and I'm doing this. It doesn't do anything.
I disagree with that, but
Hold on. You can disagree with it, but literally not doing something is not doing something. If I want to affect change, I need to actually do something.
What I mean to say is boycotting and protesting certainly has yielded its results for years.
It's yielded results for me seeing something that happens. If it's creating me to get excited to do something or not do something, I understand that. But did boycotting actually force someone in government or some situation where someone was an oligarchy where someone's making thousands of millions of dollars and this black man's marching, I feel bad now, let me stop taking money from him?
So you don't think
No,
that the
did not
marches that
happen.
MLK led meant anything?
It was great to see. And I'm saying if it's creating a passion in someone else to now do something, cool. But at some point, you got to do something.
But those boycotts and those protests certainly force politicians to push legislation.
So you're saying a boycott forced a politician to do something?
They
Directly.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
A
That
boycott
was
does
almost
not
the entirety of civil rights
A boycott-
legislation.
Okay, a
100%.
boycott does not force someone to do anything.
Yes, because it puts pressure on them because it's bringing something to light.
No, it doesn't. Okay, if anyone who goes out and marches, I don't care if it's 1 million people, and that the boycott march is done. And I don't care what legislation is happening up there. There is no one in that building now going to do something because people marched. It's solely because someone's telling them to do something. Something needs to happen from someone else. Someone else needs to come in and say, okay, this is not working because this is happening. Not just because someone's marching. It's not a direct result. Indirectly, yes, it's not a direct result.
Boycotts are designed to put pressure on somebody so that they're certainly in politician world, so that their people around them can say, no, you actually have to do this.
Okay, see, you just said now someone around you has to tell you to do something.
What I'm saying,
hold on, let me say, you just said someone around them has to tell this person now to do something. Now, my question is,
politics is team.
Hold on, my question is, who are they? Again, the they. Who is this person that now is telling this person to do something?
Sure, there's plenty of advisors out there, and again,
but who's the advisor?
Chiefs of staff.
Who put them
political
there?
advisors, the politicians. There's
people who put people in positions that I didn't vote for.
Yes,
right.
But again, and
hold on, let me finish. Let me get this out.
I hear what you're saying.
No,
I know
you're not hearing what I'm saying.
Okay.
Someone is put in place that I didn't vote for. Now he's telling this person that I did vote for to do something. How do I affect that?
They are advising them to make the right decision based on the pressure that their office is getting. And then there's on the politician to who if they're a good manager, like any manager,
to listen to
the advice and then be the one to make the decision. Those are good politicians. Those are good advisors. Barack Obama talks about it all the time, how he had a lot of great advisors. He may disagree with Hillary Clinton on foreign policy, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with the person at the top, and it is their decision. So I think that, listen, you can have a lot of advisors that are unelected, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with the elected official. And then if they go against, and we talk about here in Los Angeles and here in California a lot, if they are going against the wishes of those people, you can primary them. Mm-hmm. You can run against them, and then those people have advisors that have to be listened to. Same thing with campaigns. A campaign is a contact sport, and we saw that on the debate stage as well. Politicians go through a ton of debate prep that they have to listen to. Everything that they say on stage, every comment that they make has already been filtered through their whole team. Scripted. They know everything they know based on everything that they've heard. And that's why I brought up the Beto thing at the beginning, because I'm like, for somebody who has gone around and said, I've done this around the country, to not have a solid set of plans that they've taken back from that just shows to me, and you could see it in Beto's initial remarks when he first started running, which he was like, I know that I have the privilege to run. Not the privilege to run because he's an American and Americans can run, but because he was a white guy throwing himself into this mix of people without any sort of record or any sort of policy plans, and he knew that he could do it. So I think that, what we'll start to see is that, like any job or like any boss, there are people around who are advising them to make these things. A publicist will always move and shake somebody. If you're not listening to them, you're going to go down. A manager, you're going to go down if you're not making the decision. So, but at the end of the day, it's the person who's on camera, it is the person who's in the front of the people, it is the person who is making the music, it is not on Malynda's publicist to get Malynda out there. If Malynda doesn't want to do it, then that's on her. It's not going to help her out. If the chief of staff to the president of the United States is saying X, Y, and Z, and the president doesn't listen, but we all knew it was a good idea, that's on the president of the United States, not on the advisor. Advisors are not, listen, everybody knows that the chief of staff to the president of the United States is the second most powerful person in the country. I mean, that is just a given. They're the 101st senator. They are the mover and shaker. They are the ones that pretty much controls Washington altogether. That is something that we know to be true. But again, the buck stops with the president, the chief, the Speaker of the House, all those people. And that is something that is built, not just built into the American government system, that is built into everything that we do.
So, as you said, the buck stops.
Well, I mean, I'm just using that as a phrase.
You can use it as a phrase, but it's the truth.
I'm not talking about the dollar, though.
But I am.
I'm not talking about the dollar.
But I am.
I'm not talking about the dollar.
100%.
Should I rephrase that and say
no? Don't rephrase it because
the result. I'm just using the phrase that people.
What I'm saying is the thought behind what you're saying is the prevailing thought that we all see and feel. It's all based around money. So I don't care how much someone votes or wants something. If I don't have the money to make a move, it's not going to happen. Like even this whole talk about big pharma and healthcare and all that. And then I think Gillibrand she said something about I want them to compete. I want these big insurance companies to compete and get out there. And she says, but I don't think they're ever going to put people in front of their profit. It's never going to happen.
But we know that.
Okay, so we know that. So what are we really trying to fight against?
Sure,
What's really
but I also
happen?
think that this has been a conversation that we have not had. Like now things are being put into the forefront, like, since 2016. And, I give Bernie Sanders credit for making that a narrative that people need to start talking about, which we never had to talk about before because people really did not know what was going on around them. But now we are putting that at the forefront of the narrative since Citizens United, since the Supreme Court decision on Citizens United. And Democrats have been talking about overturning Citizens United as soon as that, because we knew what the end result would be, and how that would affect everybody else, whether or not that would have benefited Democrats in general. But we knew that opening that can of worms would have been the problem. So it's been the narrative that we've been talking, and now it has been amplified since then. And as people start to run, you've seen a lot of candidates say that they're not going to take money from big corporations through this campaign cycle. Now, how that translates into the general election is going to be a little bit different when the president raised $25 million since he started re-election on day one, and that's something that we have to compete against as Democrats across the board, not only in that bucket that's going into the presidential, but in what the Republican Party or the GOP has also raised to fight these Senate campaigns and everybody that's up for re-election in the House of Representatives. So, they're like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez up for re-election. Here in the 25th District of California, Katie Hill up for re-election. Alana Presley up for re-election. Like these folks are up for re-election because they had to campaign from day one because that's how the system is built, right?
Right.
So, but we cannot compete against $25 million. $100 million, $1 billion. That was the last election cycle. If we start, if we don't have people engaged and certainly giving money. Every time I get a call from the DNC or the DSCC, I literally tell them on the phone, I was like, I have a lot of local races that I have to focus on here in California. So I'll be giving money directly to those candidates and not necessarily the arm. Because while you guys might be doing great work, I have to focus on the races that are here in California. And I have to focus on the other races. When I post about other races in Maine, like Susan Collins has two Democratic primary opponents right now that just announced two women, and one of them is the Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives. And I said, I'm not going to tell people throw your money at this person. I am going to say, if you know somebody in Maine, make sure that they know that there's a Democratic challenger in Maine. It's not my job to throw money at Maine, like everybody threw money at Beto in Texas, like everybody threw money at Jon Ossoff in Georgia. Let corporations throw their money at Jon Ossoff. And then let the folks of Georgia and Texas and Maine, throw their, put their money where their mouth is if they want different representation. That's on them. But here in California, we have a supermajority of Democrats. We're doing exactly what California is, the blue beacon of Democratic policy, and we're making those changes, whether or not some people see it or not. But and some people certainly don't like it across the country. But this is what we voted in. This is what we have asked the governor to do, and he's doing it. And that's what the name of the game is. You vote for your own folks,
right? So before we move on to talking a little bit more about the debates, I do want to follow up with you, Karmel, because I love that we do have differing opinions on this. But as far as voting nationally, is president the only thing you don't vote for, or you just don't vote for anything nationally?
Yeah, because when we say national, we're talking about the District of Columbia, which was consolidated in 1871. It's a corporation, so we're not talking about an actual government, or I have the state. I'm a Californian, so I'm a part of this state. So those things that actually affect me, I can actually change. Like back in, we had the big bank bailout, was it 2008, whenever that was. Like the government gave money to banks when the government already federally insured those banks. So why are you giving money to people who already had those loans insured because it's a part of a system that I'm not a part of. I didn't get any money for that. People I know lost their houses, lost all kinds because they were default on loans to those very banks. So why didn't those people get money to then pay off those loans? Because the banks still would have got the money. That's what I'm talking about. I have no way of affecting that because that's a system I'm not a part of.
I feel like Andrew Yang would be your candidate with his freedom dividend.
And with Andrew Yang, that was an unfortunate situation.
I know.
I don't know if I texted you, but Andrew Yang has, first of all, he is a billionaire with nothing to do.
But he still deserved a right to talk.
And he got his 60,000 unique donors. He's polling, and he did that with the idea that he was going to be the candidate to talk about universal basic income. And what ended up happening was when he was asked directly about his universal basic income plan and how it would be funded and how it would work, his answer was so inadequate that I was like, how is that the one issue that you have been touting around, that you're running on, that you're touting, and you have not come up with an answer? That
I was interested to know how this was
I was waiting
work.
on him to...
Do you know what
I've heard about it, yeah.
So it's basically give $1,000 to... There was a certain
every household.
To every household.
It's like every month.
Every month. So you get $12,000, basically a free income to kind of help people. His whole thing was to bridge the wealth gap. But it's like, how are you going to do this?
Right.
And he couldn't give us a distinct answer. And
yeah,
I was
it was
really
like, how are you going to... And I was like, that's all you've been talking about.
Right.
That's all you know, and you don't have an answer that would really push you over the top and get people interested.
But we know
in
this guy, he's not a politician. So he's
sure, but he's a businessman with the
sure.
plan. And if you are a successful business person, that means at some point you would have had a plan that you would put together something for people that's tangible, for people to see, and that's the case. For him not to have been like, here are the three basic. For him not to have a 3-point plan, basically, that's up there that he rehearsed 100 times. That he'd been talking about,
and he didn't have,
and he just didn't have the basics
of
his plan. And I'm like,
even Marianne Williamson had a plan,
and that's been
she was going to fight Trump with love.
And that has been my problem with Bernie Sanders since day one, right? Which is, and you saw it again on Wednesday night, which was for 4 years or for 2 years you ran. For 4 years, you had the opportunity to redefine and repackage your plans. And then what we saw on Wednesday night was a person who regurgitated the things that he said 3 years before, that was not repackaged, that was not new, and that would not be able to sell how things would work.
However, that is why his supporters still support him, because he has remained consistent. Whether I agree with it or not.
Consistency is one thing. I want you to be able to expand on your consistency and say, I listened to what people were saying. I understand the criticism that I don't have plans, that I don't have an adequate way to convey how I think this is going to work, how I plan on paying for X, Y, and Z, because that's what people want to hear. That you might have a roadmap, but you're going to be the one driving, and I need you to be able to switch gears whenever we need it.
Right.
And Bernie Sanders has not been able to fully explain anything without talking in hyperbole.
So you see, a lot of what this is if a person has a plan that they can articulate well, then I might vote for you.
So you, Karmel, would actually vote for them?
If they could no, I'm saying that doesn't matter to me. Like, because you're articulate. I mean, Obama, of course, is one of the most articulate presidents, if not the most articulate ever. So we have a standard where we have to look at him and say, okay, this guy said it. He sounded great. But I'm talking about execution. Like, why do I need to get up and excited for someone just because they can speak well? Or they, like Andrew Yang, okay, yeah, he should have been more prepared to give an answer for the one thing you've been talking about. But he's a businessman. So I'm sure he didn't probably go into every business meeting rehearsing things over and over because he just lives and breathes it. That's his thing. This is politics. So yeah, he came up with this plan. Who knows how long he actually decided to run for president. So I'm saying is, yeah, he didn't articulate it well. And there are some people who will articulate well. That's what we're basing our vote on.
Well, yeah, because you want to understand what the heck they're talking about.
I get that. I understand that.
Have to. I'm sorry, but like when Obama spoke, I understood every single thing he said. When Trump speaks, my head hurts.
Right.
So
you can see that.
The thing is, how did he get in then?
By exactly what Marianne Williamson said, not without having a plan, by simply saying "Make America Great Again."
Sure,
because he pandered to those type of people.
And Donald Trump, and we talk about this a lot. And listen, the Supreme Court. Let me rephrase that. Americans got a little bit of a reprieve when the Supreme Court voted on gerrymandering last week, which has been the bane of mostly Democrats. So anyway, but what happened with Donald Trump was that, and he said it the other day in an interview, I think with George Stephanopoulos, which was he basically gave the game away, which was he said Hillary Clinton didn't go into the states that she could win the Electoral College. I did. I went there, and I knew exactly where I needed to be. Hillary Clinton was like, I'm going to be president for everybody. So I'm going to go into all these states, and I'm going to visit, when I need to, and I'm not going to play the electoral map game because if I believe that people are on the right side, I'm not going to have to be there very long, and I'm just going to have to show up maybe a couple times and move on. And Donald Trump just doesn't make sense. Donald Trump spent time in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Ohio and those 3 states, and those are the only states that he had to win. Donald Trump didn't have to come to California. He may have come twice, even though we have 5 million more people than in our state than anything, and he didn't have to do that. So the Electoral College system was in his favor, and that's what ended up happening.
Well, that's the first thing that needs to go.
And that's how he got elected. He certainly didn't get elected by popular vote. However, what we are seeing is states say that if you win the popular vote, you get the state's electoral numbers.
That's what needs to happen.
That's certainly the thing that needs to happen over the next.
I just don't understand the point of having electoral college. Like,
it was designed to not have a state like California decide what the election was.
For sure. In a nutshell. But it's antiquated and it needs to go because if we vote for somebody, that is who needs to be president.
Right. So many of these systems.
Hillary should be president right now.
But I also think that to go back to what we were saying before, nobody understands anything. I think as people start to get certain systems, people are like, why is it like that?
Right.
And how do we change that? For example, I just sat in a meeting a couple of weeks ago or earlier this week where we were arguing about the bylaws of an organization. And I said, and a lot of us were like, somebody said, well, this is the way it's been interpreted for 30 years. But the rest of us were like, well, going to have to change that because 30 years is not 2019, right? So those are the things as people start to, because we exposed the problems of the system. And as we start to expose the problems of the system, people start to look at it a little bit differently and go, well, we got to change that. The Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is calling out certain things and actually saying it on C-SPAN, which we normally do not see from politicians, right? The Katie Porters who can say, I wrote a whole book on the tax system. And you're trying to tell me how this works? Well, I can tell you because my book is right here, right? Like those are the people that are out there saying that kind of stuff. And so I think the more that we start to educate people on how things work, and this is why every time we talk about a system that I'm like, well, this is how it actually works. Like I want people to know how it works, as opposed to being like, well, this is what they said. I don't agree that certain systems are right. I'm just saying this is the system. Now, what you do with that information, you can either help change it, you can run for office, you can get involved, but if you just let the system continue doing what it's doing after you know what it's like, well, then that's on you.
Right.
And see, that's where I play. It's like I know the system, I understand where it sits. I'm just willing to play the game versus fighting it because it doesn't make sense to me. Like, this is a big thing about how Amazon made $100 billion, whatever, and didn't pay any taxes.
No taxes, yeah.
Why should they?
Why should Amazon pay taxes?
Yeah, why should they pay taxes?
Well, look, I think that when if there's a way for us to pay for certain things, certain social programs, and we put a tax on corporations and certainly not the people, not the, there's a way to, I think that, and Joe Biden talked about it last week, which got him into trouble, where he said, the tax system under me would not necessarily change for certain people, certain individuals and families that way. But the other side of that is if he would have said, however, we will still tax heavily corporations across the country, then that's one thing because the corporations are making the profit.
So there's what I'm saying. So there is what I'm talking about because you have a feeling about what you think should happen. Joe Biden is saying, here's what we would do to those corporations.
I'm not saying that's what he said. I'm saying that the idea is that this should be the way that it works.
It should be.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, Jeff Bezos and Amazon isn't doing anything wrong. There is no federal law that they have to pay taxes.
No.
We believe that there is. We think, the IRS, which also is a private entity, Federal Reserve private entity ran by 13 families and a bunch of banks. People don't know that.
Right. But the
So
Constitution...
I'm saying when people don't know those things. So if people knew those things, that would create change.
The Constitution does talk about taxes in a way that Congress can obviously levy taxes on people, right? And then years ago, the Supreme Court said that corporations are people, they can do that. So to me, it makes sense for me to be like, well, if corporations are people, they can pay taxes like people. Because that's really... because if Amazon as a company can pay taxes and they can help influence an election, this is hypothetical, I'm not saying that Amazon has done this, then they should be paying taxes just like the rest of us.
I'm sure Jeff Bezos and several billions of people who make tons of money know the law and are able to walk freely and not pay taxes because they understand you have to be contracted under a certain entity to now be under that jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I think that those people are certainly tax evaders, and certainly that will catch up to them.
Look, we could have this conversation for forever, but I don't even know if I have enough megabytes to upload this episode. But anyway, but we're gonna continue with a few things before we get to the end. But I do want to talk a little bit about that's what we're supposed to be talking about, and we just been talking about politics. But this is good. So this is politics episode as a whole. But going back to the debate and going back to the candidates that we do have to choose from. Who did you guys feel had strong moments in both nights, and who do you think is completely did not do themselves any favors? For me, the first night, it was definitely Julian Castro, Elizabeth Warren, and Cory Booker. The second night, clearly Kamala Harris. I don't think Joe Biden and Bernie did themselves any favors, to be honest, and Pete Buttigieg really did surprise me. He really did surprise me.
I think as a whole... Elizabeth Warren. I actually liked de Blasio. I actually liked some of the things he said.
I did too.
He felt genuine.
Felt like a homie.
Right. Exactly.
He's a New Yorker.
Yeah, he felt like a homie though.
Okay,
he's an honourable mention for me for sure.
Definitely those two.
I ride the Elizabeth Warren train pretty hard. That's night one. Julian Castro should have been the 2016 vice presidential nominee with Hillary Clinton. I will say that every day. And we saw why on that stage today.
Well, no one knew who Tim Kaine was, but that's...
Well, yeah, but Julian Castro was a favorite.
Yeah.
Even back then. And I don't know, choosing a vice presidential nominee is hard to begin with. So I don't know at what point during the vetting process the Clinton campaign said, I don't know if Julian's going to be able to work out. So obviously something fell apart. Night two, Kamala Harris, obviously. I think I understand the interest in Pete Buttigieg from a historical standpoint. He doesn't have a large set of plans that he's interested. That he's kind of put forth. He has a little bit of time to do that, but it certainly was not something to come out to the gate because for him to say something about, for example, on the police shooting in South Bend. For him to be like, I just couldn't get it done without backing it up with, I couldn't get it done, but here are the things that I would have done differently. That's certainly something that he should have been prepared for.
He should have had a follow-up.
And should be able to answer that portion.
I
Because
agree.
that would have showed me that you not only took the time over the last few weeks to learn about it, here's the things that you plan on implementing not only in South Bend, but that you think can carry nationally. And that would open up a larger conversation about police forces in America. And then you can tap into that and then expand on that. And that would show me that you can be president.
But I will say, I appreciated his honesty in that moment. Yeah. Because there are so many politicians that would have just, come forward with the BS about what didn't happen or we tried to do this. But he was simply like, look, I couldn't get it done. Yeah. And that to me, I was like, I love that honesty because politicians just lie,
Oh, yeah. So,
and I appreciated it.
So me, sometimes I like it when you look like you don't have it together. Like I like if you feel more
you're
tangible.
Human.
You're human. I kind of like that.
But the answer, and again, like I said, everything is always really. I'm sure it was an honest answer, but I'm sure it was an answer that he had already decided that he was going to say when it came up.
Right.
Which was, what could you not get done? Because I still don't know what that meant. Listening to it, I'm like, I don't know what you couldn't get done. Was it a policy that you couldn't get done? Was it the fact
better
that
police
there's
training
police
or
training
something?
that you couldn't get? Like, what could you not get done?
I do want to hear more.
Yes. Again, the wall, the buck stops with the mayor. However, you need to explain what you cannot get done because that does not make sense to anybody. Saying that, and I get that was the soundbite that he said and that people latched onto. But if you actually think about it, you're like, I don't know what you actually said.
Right. I get you. So moving forward, what are we hoping to hear from these candidates in the second round of debates?
Less Spanish. Please leave the Spanish alone.
Don't you want to learn another language?
I know Spanish. This is funny. I
I
speak
do
Spanish.
too. I do too.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm
it's
hearing
just
that.
funny.
Like,
You're like, why? Okay.
Oh
You're
my
like, wow, he
God.
couldn't even conjugate that verb on the stage.
Right? Oh my
Necessitos
God.
is not something that we use all the time.
Oh my gosh. That's oh my gosh.
I,
my God.
I think I want to hear more. I guess more plans of execution, not just bringing up the actual topic of what it is, but like, and you said this, like, what were you actually going to do about this or that? Like, because ad nauseum is just so much about listing every single issue again. I keep hearing it listed over and over. Okay, you listed so many times. Can you? I'd rather have someone stick to one and then speak at length about that and give some delineate some steps towards actual reform in those different areas.
I would like to see less people.
Yes.
I'm really hoping that number gets cut in half on the debate stage.
So it's just 10 total.
So it's just 10 total. I think that we certainly need to hear, like I said, a lot more plans. I think the questions certainly need to be tailored to a few more things like climate change. They certainly need to talk a little bit more about what's happening on our southern border in Puerto Rico, why people are coming up to America, what the global plan is for folks who are fleeing places like Honduras, how, what our plan is to deal, like everybody, the hard part is going to be dealing with the Middle East. Certainly North Korea is going to come up in terms of stockpiles, but there are certain things that we have done over the past few years that we've put in place that the Trump administration has just reversed, and that's why we're in the shit that we're in right now. And it's just making sure that those systems and those protections go back into place. And, we can talk about race all day. Donald Trump didn't even know what busing was yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw that clip. But
I'm not surprised.
He literally said, well, that's typically the primary way that people get to school. That's what he said.
So you thought she was just complaining about being on a bus?
Yes. Wow. So
He was like, "Who is this bougie ass black woman?"
Said it,
She's mad about a bus.
It wasn't even like it was in print. It was on camera.
Oh my God.
At the G20 this weekend. So
that doesn't surprise me at all.
But see, the problem with that is he's not alone.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, people
totally
don't
not
know.
alone.
People are idiots.
Yeah.
And he's the biggest one. So
And his supporters follow.
Right. So I think that there are different things that we need to hear a little bit more of. I would like to see, and I was talking to somebody who actually who ran Kamala's Senate campaign yesterday, and I said, what do you think is going to happen next? And he's like, I think she's going to dig in on Joe Biden a little bit more. And we've seen the polling do that. Joe Biden was knocked down 10 points.
Yeah. He didn't do himself any favors.
He
really
just
didn't.
in a couple of days, it's moved Kamala up a little bit. It's moved Bernie up a little bit. It's moved Elizabeth up a little bit. But I don't think that we're going to see the effects of last week's debate for another week as candidates start to do that. Because Joe Biden is not going down without a fight on black voters. He was at Rainbow Push the next day talking about it. The Rainbow Push Coalition.
And he didn't do himself any favors there either.
I don't know that. Here's the problem with Joe Biden. I don't know that reading the headlines, like listening to him, like I understood everything that he was saying.
For sure.
And it made sense. I was like, well, yeah. I mean, what you're saying about, somebody being a Nobel laureate versus being,
in a
versus
hoodie,
being
a gangbanger. No,
like,
I got what he was
like,
saying.
But and
for
then
sure.
the media turned that into a thing, and you're like, but he's right.
And that's what I said. And that's what I said too on Twitter. I was like, look, guys, because even Cory Booker tweeted it out. And
Because
he was
Cory
like,
Booker needs to latch on to it.
He does.
Right.
He does. I mean, and if you don't know what we're talking about, Joe Biden made a comment. He's like, we need to get to a point where, the kid in the hoodie is not considered a gangbanger because he could be the next poet laureate. And I was like, that is true, because we do need to stop assuming that people wear hoodies are gangbangers. Right. He was talking to the people in the audience, the older white people. Could he have said it better? I think so.
I certainly could have, I think he could have said something like, we don't want that happen. We don't want the situations that happen to folks like Trayvon Martin. If he would have started to invoke, one of the things that I did this year when I was chair of Pride this year is, the theme was like who we fight for this year. And part of that was reminding people that every policy has a name attached to it. everything that we do has a name attached to it, whether or not it is, Black trans women being killed on the streets of Los Angeles or around the country, or service people getting kicked out, or gay people getting kicked out, or in 17 states across the country, you could still be fired for being gay. So like there are different things that is as long. I wish politicians, and especially Joe Biden, who uses anecdotes a lot, to start putting a name to everything. Right. As you start to say something, say, we don't want this to happen because this happened to this person. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is what's happening. Because as you start to connect to different people, that makes a little bit more sense. We don't want what happened to in Charlottesville with X, Y, and Z to happen in your home, as we're going to connect it to gun policy. Right. We don't want what happened to all these 25 people in Orlando and then the shooting in that. We don't want teachers to have to pay for their own school supplies because this happened to this person in Michigan and Indiana and stuff like that. As they start to do that, and some politicians do that. Hillary Clinton was really good about that because she remembers everything. And I think that Joe Biden would probably do himself a little bit better if he started to identify better instead of talking in a.
But he's also old.
Yeah.
Well, then
I mean, he's also old.
He might not be able to remember.
I think we have to remember that with him. But for me, going into these next debates, I know this ain't going to happen, but I wish I could see even talking time between the candidates, because as much as we may not know about some of these other candidates, that's why we need to hear them talk. I don't think it's fair. I think, yes, you go in with the people who are popular, the people who, have had their names out there because they're, powerful senators and they've been speaking out and they've had more airtime. But I don't think that I don't agree with this debate format at all. I think it needs to be redone. I think everybody should get a few questions and everybody should be able to answer them, because I don't think it's fair for people like Marianne Williamson, and I laugh because God bless that woman, and Andrew Yang and the people that we didn't even really get to hear talk for maybe 30 minutes into the debate. It's unfair. Yeah. So I would like to see more equal speaking time. It's not going to happen, but that's just my perfect world dream.
TV time certainly does not help people out because there's just not enough time to talk to all those people.
What'd you say?
TV time.
Oh, yeah.
There's just not enough time to talk to those people.
Right. But then they need to just make the questions even. Every candidate gets 3 questions for the night, and then you have 2 to 3 minutes to answer it, and that's it. I mean, again, this is Melinda's perfect world situation. It's not going to happen.
Just, look, Dark Crystal's coming out on Netflix soon, and she probably is into that kind of stuff.
I'm upset with you. But I'm sure her book... I'm sure her book is going to be selling out in the next
That's what she's on this
weeks.
Debate stage for.
Oh, yeah.
We already know. Listen,
smart.
Marianne, and we were talking about it before we started recording. I said, the camera pan that Marianne Williamson had that NBC did on her, it was very theatrical. Mm-hmm. And then her head was moving, and she was just into it.
And that
she
accent.
She looked like a Fraggle Rock.
Oh, stop it. But that accent, where is she from? It was like, I don't know. It wasn't... she's
I
American,
was waiting.
But I don't know.
I was waiting on her to pull a RuPaul quote. Everybody say love, and just have everybody.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that. You know what?
But you know what? I'm not mad at her.
If she had said, in the words of my friend RuPaul,
she would have gotten every gay.
All the gays would have been like, "You right, girl. Yeah. You are right.
Exactly.
You are right." And then the audience would have been like, Rachel Maddow would have been like.
I love it. Well, I'm looking forward to see these next debates in
July.
July. It's coming up
end of the
soon.
month.
Yeah, end of the month. Right. So they got some time to raise a lot of money, and hopefully, is it 2 nights again?
It is.
It's gonna be 2 nights.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see how many people make it through. Hopefully, it's only one night, and then we can just get through all these candidates. But in typical We Need to Talk fashion, at the end of every episode, we'd like to highlight a community, organization, person, somebody that is doing good in the world, and of course, we asked our esteemed guest Drexel to highlight an organization this week. So who do we got this week?
Well, it is the last day of June, which is the last day of Pride Month. New Yorkers are celebrating World Pride right now. My friends are complaining about the cover charges to get into bars right now, but it seems like everybody's having fun. San Francisco Pride is today. LA had their Pride a couple of weeks ago, and I know Prides all across the country are happening. But of course, one of our biggest organizations that is so vital to the LGBT community is the Trevor Project, a 1998 organization that really focuses on LGBTQ suicides. And we certainly want folks to remember that if you know somebody who is thinking about hurting themselves because they don't have the support system. Remind them that they certainly do have the support systems in their communities and amongst their friends, and that there are organizations out there like the Trevor Project that are available 24 hours a day, and that are certainly willing to help you talk through some things, get you the resources that you need, because there are a lot of really great organizations that I could go into, from the Trevor Project to the Point Foundation, and even your local LGBT center, that will certainly be there whenever you need them. So, take a look at Trevor Project and donate, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for listening, you guys. That was a good little debate. We had our own debate on this.
A little bit.
I like it. We need to heat things up on occasion. So we'll see you next week. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we will talk to you next week.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.